So for today's grounding and check-in, I'm going to be sharing screen briefly here. So the Open Road Fund, which Nexus leads, created a definition of Black wealth, and we thought it would be nice to help set the space for today's session by reading that and reflecting on it. So I'm going to share screen here so we can read that as a group, and then we'll get into small groups to reflect and check in with each other about what's coming up from you for you from that, as well as anything else that comes up. So sharing now. And if anyone, let's see, I'd love to open up the space if anyone would like to volunteer to read a paragraph of the definition before. If not, I will start us off. But Chipo, yep, feel free to read that first paragraph for us.
Black wealth is about liberation and freedom from dependency in a culture that has reproduced anti-Blackness and robbed Black people of their creativity. Attaining Black wealth is about restoring what has been stolen, rebuilding our communities, and reclaiming our right to self-determination. By reclaiming our ancestral birthright, we seek restoration as we heal from the loss and denial of ancestral knowledge, familial connections, and our most sacred traditions rooted in family, love, and community. Ancestral restoration enables us to take control of our minds, bodies, and soul. By reclaiming our sovereign rights to take control over our lives and what we produce, build, or invent, we seek the freedom to reclaim the land, build new institutions, resource those institutions, and gain new tools and knowledge that can enrich the next generation and creatively decide what quality of life we deserve and what services we need. Black wealth is about liberation, restoration, freedom, and creativity to reclaim our mind, body, and soul, to heal from ancestral disruption and present-day displacement, to gain our right to self-determination through ownership of what we produce, build, or invent for our families and community through our creativity and excellence. I love this definition.
Thank you. Thank you so much for reading that for us. So now we're going to take about the next 10 minutes to do a timed share. So we'll be in about groups of three. So we'll have, let's say, about 3 minutes per person. It would be great if one person in the group could be a timekeeper to help keep us on track for 3 minutes each. But we just want you all to check in with each other, talk about this definition, talk about whatever else is coming up for you. So I'm going to stop sharing screen here just to make sure that the breakouts, okay. So it looks like it's about 3 to 4 people per group. So if you're a group of four, maybe it's 2.5 minutes instead. But again, the breakout rooms have been created. I might move some people around. Let me see. Looks like more folks are coming, so let me just wait a second here. Want to make sure everyone has at least 3 people. Great. Okay. So the breakout rooms have been created. I'm going to open them up now, but let's take about 2.5 to 3 minutes per person to share, and then we'll bring you all back as we transition. So the room should be open so you can join.
Morning, y'all.
Mm.
Morning, Christina. We're just doing our check-in, so just having folks move into breakout rooms.
Okay.
They'll come back.
Is there a way to, I'm not seeing how to pause right now. the recording for some reason.
Oh, because it's on my laptop, I need to change it. Sorry. It just might be on my computer today. I'm sorry. But yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
No problem.
All right. So Christina Nicholson has been working in cooperatives in Minnesota for 25 years in a wide range of roles, from front of house retail to construction to cooperative consulting. In all of her endeavors, the thread has been working to connect communities to each other through common cause. This has been framed for Christina as a shared economy that questions the normative culture of the unequal exploitation of labor. Rather than focus on what is wrong, cooperatives look to inspire a shared sense of success and equity among community members within the cooperative. When done well, cooperatives celebrate the unique contributions of individuals while challenging assumptions about how we perpetuate destructive myths around gender, race, and class. Christina is so excited to be part of Nexus and looks forward to learning from her peers who continue to inspire her with their vast knowledge of community wealth building, leadership, and development of strategic partnerships. When not at work, Christina likes to spend time with her wife, their dog, and their daughter when she's home, all while making food, growing food, sharing food, and arguing about who is doing the dinner dishes. Thank you, Christina, for being here. I'm going to make you a co-host. Don't forget. But thank you so much for joining us and pass it over to you.
Thank you, Liana. Thank you, Nikuli. Thanks, everyone. I'm really honored to be invited to spend time with you this morning. I was off screen getting ready to put the slide deck up and talk with you all this morning, and I just want to pause as we enter this space, and I want to name a couple of things. Not that I can change them, but I do think there's power in naming things. I was asked to come into the space today to talk about how to raise capital for businesses, right? For cooperative businesses, and how to access capital and build capital. And so I'm going to talk about that this morning. And um, I do it with a foundational understanding that we live in inherently exploitive and broken systems. So even the term capital itself can be triggering for people, and I understand that. And so as we move through this conversation, I'm open to that conversation, and I did put some time in at the end of the presentation to talk a little bit about other approaches to exchange outside of cash, outside of dollars, and how people can think about creating businesses that live outside of our current capital system. So we are going to move through a fairly traditional presentation around capital and assets, but I do want to hold that space, and I want to acknowledge that there are other approaches, and we will talk about some of them, but certainly there are others. So with that, I'm going to get started. And then Liana and Nikuli, am I right? Rhythm-wise, if there are questions, they'll go in the chat. I'm happy to answer as we go through the presentation. It's not going to throw me if people have questions. I'd rather work at the question as it comes up. And then if we're running long on time, we can make a determination about maybe holding questions towards the end. But sometimes I think it's better to answer a question when it comes up than wait. So I'll try and do that as we move through. Okay, so I'll start with sharing my screen. Make sure everybody can see that, and I'll put it in share mode, and I'll put it in slide mode. Okay. All right. So can everyone see that first approaches to capital slide?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll start here. So we're going to talk about approaches to accessing capital for cooperatives. So in my role at Nexus in the Shared Ownership Center, my day-to-day job is really supporting co-ops, both startups and transitions, in finding ways to make their businesses run, both on the governance side, but also in creating a solid business model. And a good chunk of that is finding how to name the amount of money they need to make the business run, and then finding resources for those funds. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. So first thing we're going to do is just an overview of what I'm going to present this morning. We're going to define capital as it lives in this presentation. We're going to talk about how you determine what your needs are for capital for your business, for your co-op. We're going to give some examples of kinds of capital. We're going to talk about operationalizing your capital drive. So what are some of the steps that you take when you've determined how much you need? How do you go after it? We'll talk a little bit more explicitly about some fundraising approaches for cooperatives and some of the experiences I've seen that have been successful. And then we're going to answer some questions about fundraising. And then we'll talk about some other approaches that live outside of traditional capital models. So for the purpose of the presentation this morning, we're going to talk about capital in two ways. The most general sense, capital is cash, right? So how are we going to raise money, cash for the business, or short-term assets? And what we mean by assets are things that can be turned into cash in less than a year. So some specific definitions that we're talking about when we're talking about capital. One is working capital, and that's what we mean by what do you need to run your business day to day? And that is paying the rent, paying the bills, paying people's paychecks. That is working capital. Equity capital is money that you can make by selling shares in your cooperative. We'll get into some specifics of that around how you set up your capital to either be a 308A or a 308B in Minnesota. I know that we have co-ops here from across the country, and I know you know that each state has its own guidelines for how you design co-ops. What I mean is basically when you make a decision about whether you're going to have a cooperative that can only be owned by the worker owners themselves, owned and controlled, or whether you can have investment shares. So outside investors who will not have voting control over the co-op, but could receive some amount of return on investment for the co-op. Again, they would not have control or voting shares of the co-op. And then debt, right? Go out and get a loan. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So the first thing that most co-ops, businesses need to determine is what's called sources and uses. I did this backwards because usually what people think about is what do I need to pay for, right? What do I have to pay for? What is it going to cost? So the basics, again, tend to flow from working capital. So what are the needs of the business in the first year? What about longer term? And that is, are you going to buy a building? Are you going to buy big equipment that you're going to have to pay off for multiple years? Those are some of the things that people think about. So we're talking about salaries, raw materials. For example, if you're running a clay studio, do you need to buy raw clay? If you're doing a textile shop, do you need to buy raw textiles, right? Or wholesale goods if you're running a bakery. Do you have rent, or are you buying a building and you need a mortgage? Any kind of specialty equipment, you're running a donut shop, you need a donut maker. Or marketing, promotion, things that you'll need to pay for to promote your business. So all of those items are referred to as uses. In other words, what you're going to spend the money on. Then we're going to talk about how you're going to access money to pay for those things. That's what's known as sources. What are the places where you're going to get that money from? So this is kind of a list to think of what are some areas that you could pull some money from. The first one is what we call the 3 Fs, friends and family, and fundraisers. Some example of that are what we've all known historically as rent parties, t-shirt sales, poster sales, music events, things of that nature. We'll get into some more examples of that. Donation platforms, we'll talk more about that. Some startup grants. I'll give you some examples of some places where pre-incorporation, right? We'll get into some conversation about nonprofit, for-profit, what that means. there could be some grants out there. Member equity, and again, that gets into members purchasing both their voting share, but what about their equity shares and what is the cost of membership for co-op? And that cost of membership outside of their initial voting share can go towards having cash in the business. If it's transition as opposed to a startup, there could be seller financing in that, and we'll talk about that. Forgivable loans for real estate, meaning that you get a loan, but you may not have to pay it back. Loans from a nonprofit, for example, loans from a community development fund, or loans from a traditional lender. Typically, and we're talking like a big bank, right? We're talking your US Bank, your Wells Fargo, no. Typically, they require what's called a single signatory, which means one person is on the hook for that money. That typically doesn't work in a co-op, as many of you know. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how you might be able to manage that. So first, let's talk about the 3 Fs. So these are some examples of 3 Fs. So for friends, one of the things that I think is challenging is how, as a cooperative owner, right, do you start getting comfortable talking about money? Keep it tight, but very briefly. When my wife and I got married, when we first started dating, we had both been divorced. It was our second relationship. And we went to a finance class, and it was a finance class for couples. There were 14 couples in the class. We watched, of the 14 couples, 3 couples break up in the class because they could not talk about money. 2 of them literally broke up in the class as we watched them implode in the class. So talking about money can be really triggering for a lot of people. It is an opportunity to think about how we become grounded in our values and how we think about the fact that money is a tool and can be a tool for liberation, right? When we talk about Black wealth and building Black wealth, it can be a tool for liberation. And we know that it has caused a lot of historic harm. So I don't throw up this slide lightly and say, hey, go hit up people for money. But it's an opportunity, right? So to think about how you talk about people with money, how you sit with your friends and talk about money, how we think about where we spend our money, right? How do our values line up with where we invest our dollars? Those are real opportunities. I have a lot of friends. We participated in no buy yesterday, right? We made a conscious decision not to spend any money yesterday. A lot of people are having that conversation. And so I think that's an opportunity. So if you know people in your community that have a passion for your work, talk to them about it. They may not have money themselves, but they may know somebody who does, right? And so even if that one conversation you have with somebody over coffee, like, hey, I'm starting a co-op, this is what we're trying to do. I've done my sources and uses. This is what we're going to spend it on. I'm trying to hit 50,000. It's audacious. I'm trying to do it in 6 months. This is what I'm trying to get from community is $25,000. I'm hoping I can meet 10 people that can get me 2,500, right? Like start breaking down those numbers and start having that conversation in community. And don't assume that people don't know people that might have it, right? And then family. Some people have family members who do have some funds stashed away, right? And be willing to drop an agreement. Don't make assumptions. And then also make sure that you're being explicit that they're not harming their own interests by making that investment, right? And then free fundraisers, right? It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Have a party, right? Have a party, ask people to bring a dish and make a $20 donation at the door, right? It doesn't have to be all heavy and sticky. Play some music, right? If you drink, buy a keg, right? Have people come and see if somebody you know can make t-shirts or print posters, right? So it doesn't have to be heavy, but some creativity can go a long way to get people excited. So also want to mention a couple of donation platforms. Give Butter is a nice one because they don't charge a lot of overhead fees. And so there's some links here and the PowerPoint will get shared out so you guys can explore that. Again, you may not want to have the full amount that you need on the donation platform. Maybe you split it. Maybe you're trying to raise, if it's 50,000, 10,000 in community donations, 20,000 on Give Butter, and then you're looking to get some other amount, another 20,000 through foundations or some other source, but this is an option. So I also want to talk a little bit about grants. I'm going to spend a little time on this because they can be sticky, but they're also an opportunity. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of opportunities. So if any of you are in St. Paul or interested in starting a business in St. Paul, we at Nexus we do have a grant available. It's the local fund. I won't spend a lot of time on it. Please reach out to us if you're interested in learning more. We, in relationship with City of St. Paul, have a $1.25 million grant fund that is available through 2026 to provide startup grants for BIPOC majority worker owner cooperatives in the City of St. Paul, right? And that grant is for technical assistance, startup money, or transition money for co-ops. So that grant is available for folks to apply for. We have a grant committee. I'm happy to share more information about it. What is unique about it is that you can either be pre-formed, meaning you haven't filed with Secretary of State yet, or you can already be an existing co-op and we can support you in furthering your journey. That's unique because, as many of you have probably experienced, in order to be eligible for a lot of grants from foundations, grants tend to flow to either other nonprofits or individuals or organizations that live kind of in that community impact space, right? And so it is challenging frequently for a for-profit cooperative, which most 90% of cooperatives are. It's challenging for a for-profit business to get a grant. So I wanted to share one example, which is one of the projects that we work on, which some of you may be familiar with. About a year ago, a group of majority Somali community of color immigrant drivers organized and took on Uber and Lyft here in Minnesota and wanted to organize a drivers cooperative. So they had legislation passed at the city level, and then they started negotiating with the state. And they wanted to organize their own drivers cooperative so that they could save more of their own wages, get paid a living wage, and have more control, right? And so we are working with them still to organize that drivers co-op. And one of the things that happened is we are doing that work in concert with MCCD, which is the Minnesota Community Consortium of Developers. And the drivers, before filing for their cooperative with the state while they were still in the meeting phase, applied for and got a $900,000 Bush grant here in the state of Minnesota. So MCCD is their fiscal sponsor. So if you are applying for a grant, one of the things you do need to keep in mind is who is going to hold the money. So it is an interesting challenge to think about not only getting money, but who is holding it, but it is part of the process you need to think about. So MCCD is their fiscal sponsor, and that money was dedicated to this project because it achieved some of the goals that the Bush Foundation had, which was centering immigrants and communities of color. It was a large impact project because we're talking about potentially impacting hundreds, right, of jobs here in the state of Minnesota. And it also, when they applied for it, it was also clear that it was going to be a long haul project, right? So March this month is a year into the project. The team has filed their co-op formally with the state of Minnesota. They have their initial founding board, right? And we are now finishing up their business plan, and we are getting ready to launch their recruitment strategy. So Bush also knew this was going to be a long-term project. And with grants, there's reporting requirements, right? So people are going to be in your business. And that is something that you have to keep in mind. There's also this other larger conversation about the nonprofit industrial complex. And that is another conversation to be aware of. So, but I wanted to give you a couple of examples. So, yeah, go ahead.
So we have two questions in the chat.
Great.
One other was asking, do you have or know of any grants for outside of the Twin Cities? We live in a rural area. And then from Renisha, maybe, yeah, I'll just read both and then you can decide.
Yeah.
How does applying for grants when needing a fiscal sponsor work? What's that process look like? I have
Mhm.
two potential organizations I want to propose to, but I don't know where to start. Apply for the grant first or reach out to the organization and come up with a plan first. Who should apply, my org or the fiscal sponsor?
Yeah, those are great questions. So for rural areas, um, a couple of things. Is the rural area in Minnesota or out of state?
It would be in Greater Minnesota, so Minnesota.
Okay. Um, I would actually direct you to CDS, Cooperative Development Services. They have a really strong rural network, and they could help you find out about what grants are available in outstate. And afterwards, I'm happy to make some introductions and form some links. The other thing that they don't advertise, but I can tell you, is that they are also a fiscal sponsor. So not only could they help you potentially find some grants, they might be able to act as your fiscal sponsor for those grants. So I think that'd be a really great resource for you. Um, and uh, I would say for the second question, it's tough, right? I think having a fiscal sponsor first helps you understand what are the constraints of the grants that you're applying for. On the other hand, getting to know grant eligibility and building relationships with grantors um, is a good thing at all times. If it's in Minnesota, we could definitely help point you towards a couple of fiscal sponsors in Minnesota that might be able to help you with fiscal sponsorship. Um, so I would say I don't think you can go wrong either way. I think they just have to be happening at a pace where you need to be aware that both have to happen in some relationship to each other. I don't know if that fully answers the second question.
Can I just
Yeah, bring it.
thank you
Yeah.
first and foremost, Christina, for answering my question.
Mhm.
I think the part that I'm just trying to understand is the process itself. And I'm 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 trying not to be so rigid when it comes to approaching these things. Like there's not no one size fit all.
Mhm.
But I have these two opportunities. So I've already spoken with one organization who's interested, but we haven't like moved on to the next step yet. So I kind of just gave them a brief overview of what I services and how my organization is structured.
Okay.
But we haven't gotten to the next step yet. And so my thing is, while I'm waiting, I guess
Mhm.
I'm trying to be proactive and figure out if there are grant opportunities available, but I know I will need a fiscal sponsor.
Mhm.
Do I wait until I have like this follow-up meeting with the potential fiscal sponsor, connect with them, figure out a plan together. And then once we kind of come with some type of agreement, who's
Mhm.
applying for the grant? Do they apply for me on behalf of me? Do I apply and then say that they're going to be the fiscal sponsor? Like, I just don't know what that looks like. I've never done this before. So that's kind of where I'm stuck.
Oh, bet. Okay, that's really helpful. I would say build out that relationship with the fiscal sponsor first.
Okay.
Typically, the reason is that a lot of fiscal sponsors have some constraints about what kind of grants they can accept. They are going to have to do some amount of reporting out for you and
Okay.
monitoring for you. So it's helpful for you to know what their capacity is, right?
Okay.
And then in terms of who applies, typically what happens is you apply, but really you are applying with them sort of next to you, if that makes
Okay.
sense. So you would, for example, you'd fill out the grant application and say, hey, just so you know, here's, they could even look over the grant application and say, hey, here's the grant application. This is the amount I'm submitting today. We should hear back on X time. Some grants would even want to know who your fiscal sponsor is, or you could let them know that you have a fiscal sponsor, and that can even be attractive to them because they know that you have everything lined up and you're ready to receive dollars. It is a challenge when a grant is awarded and then the grantee is not ready to receive it.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So it is helpful for them to know that you are coming correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That makes me feel really confident about the way I'm approaching it already.
Oh, good.
I just was like, okay, I see these opportunities for grants, but I know that some of them are going to require a fiscal sponsor, but I don't have one yet, and I don't want to waste nobody's time. So,
Yep.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Great questions. Thanks, y'all. Okay. So, yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
or
You're fine.
dropped in the chat. Do you only need a fiscal sponsor if you are not certified as a co-op?
Mm, that's a good question too. Um, it depends on the kind of grant. If the grant has a condition about what what kind of organization can receive the grant. And what I mean by that is some grants can only be given to nonprofits, right? So you just, if the grant is like, you know, a foundation that can give money to anybody they want, if you're already set up as a co-op and you have a bank account and they don't have that constraint, no problem. You can receive that money. You just need to understand what are the parameters of the grant and what are the constraints that they put on grantees in terms of who is allowed, what business structures are allowed to receive grants from that particular uh, grantor. So you just need to understand that when you apply.
Thanks.
Mhm. Okay, this is great. Keep them coming. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about member equity and preferred shares. I'm not trying to put you all to sleep, so I'm gonna walk through this. And then if you have more questions, we can get into it. If not, you can look at this and we can talk more later, or you can follow up on your own. So we're going to talk about two kinds of shares that get a little confusing in co-ops. The first one is member equity. So member equity shares, um, typically when your members join, so I focus on worker ownership. So when worker owners buy into their co-op, right? Part of their constraint is they have to work at the co-op that they're a member of. There are different kinds of co-ops, right? There's consumer co-ops, there's worker owner co-ops, there's all different kinds, right? There's farmer co-ops, right? So when members buy into their co-op, they are purchasing rights into the co-op, right? So They receive a share of the co-op's profits. They also usually are allowed to vote, and they receive a certain number of shares based on what they pay in. So usually they get what's called like a voting share, and then they also get par shares, which is sort of the additional money they pay in. Co-ops have a wide range of equity shares, of membership shares. Typically, the voting share is low. It can be as low as $1. But then the equity shares can be anywhere from $50 up to $50,000, right? There are construction co-ops where to be a worker owner, you have to pay $10,000 over time. So it is a way that you can raise cash for your co-op. Most co-ops don't charge a really high membership share, right? Equity share, because they want people to feel that it is accessible, right, to join the co-op. That is why a lot of co-ops have investment or preferred shares. And these shares are used to raise money. They do not allow people to vote or influence the decision making in the cooperative. Instead, they pay out a percentage, right? A low dividend, right? To the investors. So if the co-op declares a profit for these investment shares, the dividend can go back to the investment shareholders, or they get a small amount, right? 8% return, right? So this is what's called kind of a slow return, right? Some investors are interested in this kind of investment because they know that what they're investing in is a stable community, right? So it is attractive to them from an equity standpoint. But this is not stock market investing. The other thing that happens is if the co-op dissolves, the investors get their money back before the members get their initial investment back. So there are ways that some people have a certain kind of feeling about whether or not you want to have outside investors in your co-op, right? It is both an economic decision, and for some people, it is a social and cultural decision about how they want to run their co-op. But it is a way to raise money. And at least in Minnesota, we have two different kinds of co-ops you can form, both 308A and 308B. 308B was created in part to allow for larger investment or preferred shares to be issued as a way to raise money for co-ops. Because, in part, traditional lenders will not fund cooperative development. And so for co-ops who want to expand or grow, it was difficult for them to raise capital in a traditional market. And 308B was a way for them to gain access to investor funds. All right, if you're still awake, we'll keep moving. But that's kind of a high level way to raise capital in that kind of investor space. All right. So talk a little bit about traditional financing and co-ops generally. This is just to give you sort of some level of comfort if you start getting into a space where you're talking with lenders, be it community development funds or just sort of anywhere in that kind of traditional finance space. So general components of a cooperative capital stack. And what I mean by a capital stack is all a capital stack is when you put all your resources together for funding your co-op. Think of it as a sandwich, right? So your member equity is whatever your members have put in to become members for the co-op, right? So they paid their dollar voting share. Let's say to become a member in your co-op, it's $250, right? So they got their dollar voting share, and then 249 goes into equity. So that 249 is cash. And if you have 100 members, right, that money adds up. So you have a little cash on your bottom line. Retained earnings, after you have worked, your business has been up and running. Typically, most businesses, including co-ops, hold on to some portion of their profits because you know you need to keep investing in your business over time. And that hold back from your profits is your retained earnings. Debt financing, we talked about this, is when you go out and get loans because you know you're going to have to fund your business. And typically, debt financing helps you manage your day-to-day cash flow. And then we talked about grants and we talked about subsidies. Pardon me. Grants, we dug into a little bit. Subsidies really tend to be more for ag co-ops, things where there's a particular product or a particular activity that agencies want to support or subsidize, but they do exist. So I also just want to touch on transitions because not every business has to be started from the ground up. One of the other ways that people can run a business is by acquiring an existing business, right? Not everything has to be started from scratch. If you are, gosh, any number of businesses, if you are a leathersmith, if you are a printer, you want to run a printer press, if you are a sewer, right? And you want to run a clothing store and you want to design and sell all handmade clothing. There are already these businesses that exist, and sometimes people want to sell their existing business. That is a transition, and you can turn that into a co-op as well. So when a business is purchased by its employees, this is an example of a worker-owned co-op, the owners can agree to receive part of the purchase price over time, so an agreed upon number of years, out of the revenue of the business in the future. So let's say you're going to buy a clothing store. Let's say you're going to make it worker owned. Let's say it's 5 of you. For easy math, let's say that the owner of the store wants to sell it for $300,000 and the business is profitable enough that that is the agreed upon price. You may be able to finance $200,000 of that based on donations, right? 150,000 loan from CDFI, but that other 100,000, the owner agrees to take $20,000 every year for 5 years out of the future profits of the business. And that is owner financing, right? So they got 200,000 upfront, but that last 100,000, they're going to take 20,000 a year for 5 years. So that allows the new business owners to have less debt, right? So they're able to generate a little more money for the business, pay themselves fairly, and that owner is going to take some of that money over time. So they're invested in supporting that business and making it sustainable because they need to get that money, right? So that's an approach that I wanted to mention. So I also want to talk about an example of a forgivable loan. Don't mean to make this Minnesota heavy. These programs exist all over the country. I'm just using a Minnesota example, but certainly Chicago has examples like this, right? Massachusetts has examples like this. So please check these out in your state. This is an example of forgivable loan. This happened with Mayday Cafe, which was a transition we supported with technical assistance recently. So with Mayday, their capital stack, it's a worker-owned cooperative now. It's a bakery here in South Minneapolis. A group of worker owners, there's 5 of them, purchased the business from the previous owner. Their capital stack included community donations. They did run a Give Butter campaign. It included loans from 2 different CDFIs, both MCCD and Shared Capital. And because they were buying a building, it also included a forgivable loan from the city of Minneapolis under the Ownership and Opportunity Fund, also known as OOF. So OOF is a forgivable loan that says if you do not sell this building in the next, I think, 20 years, this loan, and I think it was like $110,000, will be forgiven. You won't have to pay it back. So that reduces the amount of debt they have, but it shows up as equity, right? If they forgive that loan. So they don't have to pay the loan back. And it allowed them to put that into the purchase price, their capital stack for the building. So these programs exist everywhere, but I just wanted to give you an example and encourage you to be curious about city resources, community resources, right? There's a lot of different resources out there. So lastly, and I would say typically lastly, the last thing you want to look at is taking on debt, right? So we'll talk about CDFIs. Community development financial institutions are definitely more open to providing funding for cooperatives, in part because that's why they exist. They are funded by other community investors. Shared capital, for example, was started by co-ops because co-ops could not get traditional funding. So cooperatives that were successful came together and started a fund to create a fund to fund other co-ops, right? And so another option can be community banks or B Corps, banks that operate as B Corps. Here locally, we have one called Sunrise Banks, and Sunrise has funded cooperatives before. And so I don't want you to just think it's only CDFIs, but the majority is CDFIs. I will tell you shared capital funds co-ops nationally. So regardless of what state you are in, shared capital has deals across the country for all different kinds of co-ops. So if you have not heard of them, I encourage you to look them up because they can be a resource for you, and you're going to talk with them this afternoon, so you'll get to know them. Another one here in Minnesota, I mentioned earlier, is MCCD. MCCD is also a CDFI, so they also do lending as well as technical assistance for co-op development. They're a great resource. We work with them, and I can't say enough about them. They're just great colleagues, and they do a lot of co-op development here in the cities. All right, so keep us moving today, just talking about capital drives. We've talked about some of this. This is just really helping you think about how you walk through your process of getting your capital drive together. So if you haven't incorporated yet, thinking about your eligibility for grants, what's that strategy going to look like? If you have incorporated, to the question that was asked earlier, great question. What grants might you be eligible for? What grants are out there that even if you are a for-profit business, you might still be eligible for? If you're in Minnesota, determining if you're a 308A or a 308B, and what your investment strategy is in terms of being open to or being able to manage outside investments. I will also say, if you are going to think about having outside investments, I strongly encourage you to have an accountant and an attorney already lined up, because if you are going to issue investment shares, you want to have an attorney look over those share documents, and you want to make sure that you have an accountant that can track those shares and that you have a good system in place for that. So thinking about those outside investments, thinking about what you're going to offer as benefits for those investments, thinking about how you've set up your bank account, how you're going to receive those funds, and then again, thinking about bookkeeping and thinking about how you're tracking those deposits. So just really making sure that it is one thing to go after money, It is another thing to have your systems in place so that you can receive that money and you are fully able to account for those funds, how they are coming in, how they are being tracked, and to make sure that you feel fully comfortable and that your co-op feels fully comfortable with how they're being tracked, how they're being separated, and how they're being basically documented, right? For the purpose of the co-op. So those are really important things. So I did, talking about capital all over the place, I did want to talk about some other things that exist, right, outside of just cash. So one thing to consider for folks who want to live sort of outside of this capital system or who want to come up with some other ways of potentially raising some resources, one is bartering. There are some co-ops who have been successful in finding complementary businesses and either bartering for labor or bartering for materials to lower their overall cost of goods. Another one is microloans, so very small amounts of money, just seed money that's given by community members instead of having to go to formal institutions just to get something started, right? If you're not ready to do like a full delivery service, is there like a $500 loan where you could just do bike delivery, right? What is a small amount of seed money to start practicing at a micro level this business that you want to expand over time? Pre-selling is another example. They're not a co-op, but they're a local business. We have a brewery over here, Northbound Brewery. I was telling Liana and Nikuli about it. They were before they opened their brew house, they sold like jars of beer. You could pre-purchase a lifetime jar, right? Like a lifetime jar of beer, and you paid, I think, $1,000, and that was the investment share. And then you had a lifetime jar of beer that you could come and fill up, I think, like once a week for the lifetime of the brewery, and they've been in business 10 years. So for $1,000, you have, if you drink a lot of beer, you have well gotten your return on investment, right? So that pre-selling idea is something you can do. And then personal loans don't always have to have interest. It can just be return of principal only, right? For folks who believe in you and who want your co-op to thrive, that's an option too, right? So you don't always have to you don't always have to start with an overpromise, right? So it's something to consider. All right, and then there's a picture of my dog Zinnia. So that's what we got today. All right, other questions?
Think while we wait for questions, Christina, I was gonna ask if you can also share about the upcoming webinar series that people can plug into.
Oh, yeah, I would love to. Thanks, Nicole. That's a great plug. So let me see. I'll send it to you all so you can share out. So we have a financial training webinar series that we're putting on through the Shared Ownership Center through the local fund. Our first one, we pushed it out a little bit. Our first one is going to be, I believe, April 3rd. So you got a little time to sign up. And we're going to walk people through financial basics, how to build a basic business plan, how to create a sources and uses, how to do basic projections. So we've got a series of 8 that we're going to walk people through. They are going to be webinars. You can sign up to do them live if you're interested. And then we're also going to record them if you want to watch them later. So they're through April and May and June. And we'll have links up on the Nexus website. But what I can offer is I'll send them out to you guys and I'll send you the dates. We just finalized them this week, and I'll be happy to send them to North Star. So if you all want to check them out, we'd love to have you.
Thank you so much, Christina. I just wanted to say I really appreciated the actual anecdotes, or rather stories that are real in our
Sure.
area, because they're very inspiring. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Monica. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's happening, y'all. We're doing the damn thing. It's a lot of lift, but we are out here doing it for real.
Christine, it's Chipo. I have a question.
Mhm.
How, um, well, I guess it's really one question.
Okay.
Um, do you have kind of materials again on that like psychological piece on finance? Like you said, it's triggering for a lot of
Mhm.
people, and I would probably say especially African American people,
Mhm.
Black people around the world, really. Um, on that, because like you said, even in your class, is there information that you can share that can kind of um, open open the conversation and also help us kind of, work around, ways we can work around and work through those kinds of conversations?
That's a powerful question, and I appreciate you trusting me to ask it. Thank you. I have some. I also think Open Road has done some really powerful webinars on healing around talking about money and wealth. And so I think Nicole and Liana probably have access to that, but I can pull up some of their webinars as well. So yes, I have a couple that I can share. And I will, I'll, Ruth Hayden is one, but I'll dig up some others and I can get them to you all by Monday if that's okay, Nicole and Liana, to share out. Would that be all right?
Yeah, we
Does
usually,
that work, Chipo?
Yeah, that works perfectly. Thank you. I
Great.
really
Mhm.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
are there any other questions, comments folks have? If not, again, thank you so much, Christina, for joining us this morning. Really
I do
appreciate
have a question.
Mm.
I'm sorry, y'all.
it.
So I'm interested in fundraising for something that is probably gonna happen in July.
Okay.
Not probably gonna happen. So there's an event in July and
Mhm.
I want to be able to have funding. I have a support group, a women entrepreneur support group, and I want to be able to take them uh to do something that it aligns with their entrepreneurial journey.
Mm.
But the funding that I want to raise is like the most that I've ever asked for. So
Mhm.
I'm like, when we talk about the healing
Mhm.
aspect of it, what stops me from even putting myself out there to ask for is one, just like, okay, it's in July, so that's what 3 months away. Am I gonna be able to reach that number by then? What does it look like if I put myself out there and I don't raise the funds? What does it look like if I do raise some funds but don't raise enough? Like I'm just like kind of in that space right now. And
Mhm.
it's to the point where I'm almost like trying to cling on to something that's more um uh stable, right? Like if I have a fiscal sponsor or if I have whatever. And the thing is, I have like so many different things that I need funding for, but this is one huge eventful thing that I would love to be able to do. And I don't know what the other side or the external side of things, like how that will be perceived as. I don't know how to explain it. Like, is this something that, because I'm just trying to give you like I'm trying to put it out there without putting it out there too much.
Yeah, I
But
got you. I got you.
I'm just like
Yeah.
having this block right now where I'm like nervous because of the timing. I'm nervous because of how people will perceive it. Like, is this something? Because I haven't seen it been done before. So it's almost like, is this something that people are going to look at and be like, well, that I wouldn't give people money to do that. Like, I don't know. I just that's just kind of where I'm at right now. So I guess what type of advice would you give to someone who is kind of like on the fence of trying to raise money? They're new at asking for a certain amount of money and just nervous about the outcome.
Yeah, vulnerability is real. Um, well, I think there's a couple of things. I would say, um, I would say start with whatever the highest high that you want to hit is and think about what it would take to hit it. And what I mean by that is, does it all need to come from one resource? In other words,
Right.
like, are you just going to put a give butter up and pray to Jesus and say, fingers crossed, right? Or are you part of a faith community, right? Are you part of this entrepreneurial group that you're a part of? Can you have a conversation with them and say, look, I believe in you. I believe in this process. I'm going to put this up. I tell your people to tell their people that we're going to do this and tell that story, right? And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that you can't be out hustling that fiscal sponsor either. Like, I think part of it is people want more now than ever before. People know the only change we're ever going to make is the change on the ground,
Mm,
right? We're the only ones we got. And
yeah.
that's really clear. So I think telling that story and telling it to as many people as possible, setting that audacious goal, but not thinking any one thing is going to get you there is the
Hmm.
key. So I'd say have at least 4 different lanes that you're trying to pursue to get you there. And don't think you're going to get there alone.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so I think the women that you want to take to this experience, get them on board with you. Don't think that you're there to save them. We're all here to save each other. So
Yeah.
have them help you, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And let me know. I mean, it's not like we don't all have social medias out here. Come on.
I will. I'll make sure I loop in Cooley and Leanna too. Once I like really start flyering and get myself out there.
Okay.
Because I'm not afraid of networking and connecting and stuff. I think again, I think it's just the relationship with money. That's my biggest thing is like I have all these imposter syndromes comes in and say like, well, that might be too much, or people might look at you and say, well, why are you asking for that much for this? And I'm just like, I did my research. I know how much it's gonna take to make this thing happen. So I know that I did, the best in the background as far as researching and trying to figure out why the numbers are where they are. But imposter syndrome comes in and says that might be too much, or people might not support it, and yeah, that's my biggest downfall right there.
Look, we have a man that sits behind the presidential desk selling hats. All right, like just
This
stop.
world is a mess right
Come
now. Yeah,
come through. Come through.
thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Does anyone else have anything, any final thoughts before we transition? If not, thank you again, Christina. Please feel free to put your gratitude in the chat or come off mute. Um, but thank you so much, Christina. That was really a wonderful presentation, and just thank you for keeping it all the way real with us as we need. Thank you.
Yeah, I just am so appreciative of the work you all are doing and everyone in this space. It it makes things that feel really hard less hard. So I'm really grateful. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your Saturday.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll send you all links. I promise, promise. I'll put it on my Asana for Monday and make sure that I get you some materials.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Peace.
All right, everyone. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we will come back and do some more reflecting around these questions that have come up. And then we will transition to our longer break. So let's come back at 26 after, please. And I'll put a little music on in the meantime. All right, welcome back, everyone. So now we're going to just transition into some small groups to further reflect on what's coming up for you during our session today. So I'm going to drop just two questions just to get us started. But of course, if other things come up in your groups, feel free to explore them. All right. So dropping them into the chat now. What is one thing that is coming up for you from this morning session? What kinds of capital do you think your cooperative group will need and why? And of course, other things that have come up, please feel free to discuss. I'm going to get the groups going. It's about 2 to 3 people in a group to talk. So we will go until about, let's say, 11:40. So about 13 minutes or so, depending, maybe 12 by the time we actually get into them. But let's say if we have 3 people in a group, that's about, again, 4 minutes per person. So again, please select someone to help track time. Um, but if you have only 2 people, you have more time. So again, we are doing just a small group reflection before we come back briefly before the longer break. So I will open up those rooms now. You'll have about, let's say, 12 minutes at that point to be in these small groups to talk more about what's coming up. So I'm going to open the groups now and enjoy that time.
I'm sorry, I just saw your message. I stepped away too for a second, but there was like
Oh,
33 minutes left.
yeah.
And Jackie. Okay. Hopefully that's a good sign.
Right? I'm sorry.
What's
I was
up?
like, good conversation. I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know what was going off.
Oh
I was
no. Look, I try to give a little heads up. Um, welcome back. Sorry to cut off the good conversation going on.
It's all good.
If anyone wants to share briefly what maybe came up in your small group before we break in a few minutes, just want to open the space for that. If anyone wants to share.
I'm sorry, but Venetia's gonna go see the Harlem Globetrotters. I'm so jealous. That's
oh,
so cool.
That sounds really
no, that is so hilarious. I was just saying that right before it went off. I wasn't paying attention, so I didn't even know it was going off. But I was sharing with them. I was like, I enjoyed this conversation. I wish we could have more time to do this. I said, maybe we should do outings. And I do outings with my group. So Women on Wednesday, we have a women entrepreneur support group, and then we do outings. So we focus on business stuff, supporting each other, healing. But then outside of that, we go outside. Like we go do stuff. And I was just letting them know I just reached out, y'all. This is something I feel like if anybody on your journey, like if you ever, we talk about the relationship with money, if y'all ever feel like afraid of asking for money, if just do it, right? Just do it. Because the least they can do, the least they can say is no. And this is
Right.
where I need to be taking my own advice when it comes to that fundraising. But let me tell y'all, I reached out to the Harlem Globetrotters. I said, hey, we need some free tickets. And they gave us free tickets. I was so excited. So yes, I'm taking my girls out to the Harlem Globetrotters this month.
You know what? That's a lot of times that's all they really would like for you to ask. Like a lot of people don't know if you have a nonprofit and you want to do an event right in Minneapolis, you have at least 10 subways that will donate your food if you submit your form at least 2 months ahead of time, and they'll service all your food.
No, for sure. And there's opportunities for people without nonprofits because I'm not a nonprofit. I just go in there and ask them. I'll be transparent. I'm like, listen, I don't have a 501(c)(3, but I got women that need, I'm supporting underserved communities. We need
Mm-hmm.
help. What are y'all willing to do? I went into Panera Bread. She was also explaining to me too, like, listen, you got to be a 501(c)(3, but I like your energy. So maybe we can connect, So sometimes they
Yep.
just be willing to get to know you as a person. And that's what I've
Mm-hmm.
learned.
And it's also a good way to for them to get some, some notoriety because they supported, your event. So it helps them. It's
100%. It's a win-win.
yeah, for sure. And Target, I know Target gives out free supplies for school and certain stuff that go on during the course of the year. You just got to submit your paper to be able to get the stuff. That's it.
You need that energy though, that gets you gets you what you're looking for.
Yeah.
100%. I was gonna say about Tarjay though. Unfortunately, y'all, they rolled back the DEI, and I have not shopped ever since they rolled back that DEI. I have not shopped there, but that is a good resource, and I'm willing to share that with other folks. But I know for me personally, it's just I'm not shopping with folks that roll back their DEI, especially public. I mean, I don't know. Is it worse if it was public or private? What do y'all think? If they did it privately, isn't that like sneaky or I don't know. Public is like bolder, so I kind of respect that. But then private is like, why are you doing it behind our back?
I agree. I agree to put it. I mean, they want to put it out there with their full chest. I too can boycott with my full chest.
Yeah. So that question right there, Nisha, that you offered, let's hold that for our afternoon as well. Because I think we'll have more time definitely to continue connecting and talking in small groups a little bit, maybe more so large group actually, but yes, there'll be more space to definitely connect further. So let's hold that until then. But yeah, I've been personally boycotting as well. I haven't shopped at Target either, but again, lots to, yes, that question, yeah, about public versus private, yeah, it's a lot. So
I have a question. Did we shop at Target before? Like, I want to know, did anybody not shop at Target before?
I think so, Monica, because we have to go into our break, let's hold that question maybe till after, please, so we can take our break. I don't want to take away from that time, but let's hold that and see if maybe we can bring that up later. Um, but yes, I see your comment, Chipo, the pressure. Yes, keep the pressure on folks. All right, y'all, let's take our break. Let's come back at 15 after or so. We'll be transitioning into our panel. So enjoy your break and we will see you then. Put some music on. Right. So we'll be getting started shortly, but did want to take some time to we'll introduce our first guest, and then when Elaine joins, we can introduce her as well. Um, but maybe before that, let's see, we have a few minutes. Mm, okay, let me make sure. All right, so I will, yes, start off by introducing our first guest for our panel, and then when our second panelist, Elaine Rasmussen, joins, we'll introduce her. So let me get that pulled up here. One moment. All right, so we are joined um today. Esther West is here with Share Capital. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to read their bio. All right. So Esther West joined Shared Capital as a loan officer in autumn 2022. They underwrite, support cooperatives in navigating the loan process, and connect cooperatives to resources. Esther has nearly 2 decades of cooperative and community-rooted experiences. She was a worker owner at Equal Exchange in the Ajani Group, has researched and mapped cooperatives with Dr. Jessica Gordon Nemhard, and as a cooperative development specialist at the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives, and has been on the boards of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, MadWork, and Listen Up Youth Media. They have a BA from Xavier University, as well as 2 master's degrees from Cleveland State University in Environmental Studies and Urban Planning, Design and Development, as well as a master's GIS certificate. She has also conducted urban planning and trails analysis, recently taught environmental studies at San Francisco State University, and works on climate justice issues. Welcome, Esther. Thank you for joining us. We'll be getting started in a few minutes here, but just wanted to share some info about you to introduce you. So thank you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yep, so the other person joining is Elaine Rasmussen. Sorry, I'm seeing your message here with Social Impact Strategies Group. So it'll be just you two, but yes, we're excited to have you both with us. So welcome. As we wait, and I know other people will be joining soon, maybe, I mean, I wanted to make space, but also didn't want to take away too much time as we transition. But I'm curious if anyone did want to share anything briefly, maybe one comment that they might want to share with the group before we transition. And if not, that's okay. We can just take a moment to settle into our bodies more as well. In the morning, we were joined by our colleague Christina. Just sharing with you, Esther, what the morning was. We had a presentation with Christina from Shared Ownership Center at Nexus, kind of walking through different kinds of capital and just different options there. So it's kind of where we were starting our day. But yeah, if anybody feels like sharing briefly before we transition, just wanted to open the space up for a second here. Right, well, that's all right. Um, yeah, so I think we can just take a moment to just settle and we'll wait for Elaine. I feel like putting on music for a minute doesn't feel necessary, but let's just take a moment to just be with ourselves for a bit before Elaine joins us, and then we will get going.
While we wait briefly, and then maybe you might just get started too. Um, I just wanted to like set some context for our panel this afternoon, or intentions for the panel. So having the information as a a foundation for this morning, and then having Esther and Elaine really talk about what cooperative financing sort of looks like, what's available, having Shared Capital Cooperative, which is located here in St. Paul. But loans does work nationally, is a cooperative itself, and supports cooperatives nationally as a CDFI, and then having Elaine Rasmussen, who is really passionate about the work for entrepreneurs with her work as social impact. And so having that aspect of a cooperative loan, a national loan that's available, and then like the entrepreneurial side of like grants, fundraising, etc. So maybe we'll get started with the first question as I like sort of ping Elaine momentarily. But yeah, we can go ahead and get started, and I'll pass it to Liana.
All right. So our first questions are kind of some grounding and introductory questions. So the first, who inspires you and what brought you into this work? And I'll just put both questions for you to answer. And then the second, can you tell us more about your organization and the work you do in the cooperative and entrepreneurship space? And I'll put these both in the chat.
Sure. Yeah. And do you want me to go ahead and answer that
Yes,
right now?
please. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and also like thank you everyone. Thank you for having me. And it's so nice to be here. I love working with co-ops that are getting started and long-term ones, but um, I really see this as part of like um community mobilization. So it's exciting to be here today. Also, I have a little cold, so if I sound funny, just tell me if you can't understand, or if I'm a little off, like that's why. Um, but yeah, so just starting with myself, I guess. Yeah, so I'm Esther, and I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. Um, and I gotta say, like, it goes back to my family for my inspiration. I feel really fortunate that both of my parents actually met as community organizers and in the 70s and or maybe 60s, I don't know, some a while back. They met a while back. And and let's see here. They met in St. Louis and my mom actually interviewed my dad for a community organizing job. Um, she was community organizer in the we're Chicana on my mom's side and we're Mexican American and um she interviewed him and the rest was history. But um basically like my dad did kept doing worker co-op organizing from like a community organizing tool as a community organizing tool and racial justice tool. He was white, and he grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but he was very very like anti-racist in a way. I still haven't quite figured out where it came from. Like it was he was a really I really appreciate that about him. Like he was the first um Vietnam War conscientious objector in Chattanooga. Like so those I really appreciate that about him and my mom. And so, I like to say that my dad helped give me the tool of the worker co-op model and community organizing. And then my mom, who went on to become a psychiatrist, um, she gave me like the power behind it and the lived experience, for why it matters. Um, so yeah. Um, and then I went on to do different co-op stuff. I've been a worker owner myself at Equal Exchange, and then I went to get my grad degrees in Cleveland. Um, I worked in planning and uh, like um, equitable parks development for a while in Ohio, and then was at UW Center for Co-ops. Um, I say that to lead up to the Johnny Group, which is a group where worker co-op of about six of us who do more like we saw a gap in education for and outreach and representation for BIPOC communities at the time when we started, maybe 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. Um, like there just wasn't that much, and we saw that how it impacted co-op education practices and co-op technical assistance. So we wanted to change that. Um, and then eventually I became a loan officer a couple years ago. I never thought I would become a loan officer or work with finances. Oh, nice, Gary. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, love Gary. Um, I never thought I'd be a loan officer. I never felt comfortable with money and period. I was actively like I can do data analysis, I can do numbers, but not money. And one day I was like, you know what? Like, I really love shared capital, and they had this job opening. And I was like, what if I actually tried to learn it? And and luckily, I've been able to learn it the last few years, and I want to share what I learned. Um, and with shared capital, what attracted me to it was what attracted me to shared capital is that it is a co-op. It's been around 45 years, and our borrowers are actually the members. So once a co-op, we only lend to co-ops, and once co-ops borrow from us, they become members and can run for our board. They direct our policies. Um, you know, we have a loan committee that gives the final stamp of approval on things, and they consist of cooperators. So we're really integrated within the co-op movement. And we don't look at personal credit scores. We don't do personal guarantees. So nobody's home or cars on the line, their personal stuff. We don't look at social security numbers or ITINs. So if you have undocumented folks, I say the more the merrier. Like, great. We need to be welcoming in this movement. Um, so that's a quick little overview. Yeah, thank you. And I can share more later. Oh, yeah, what we look for, that sort of thing.
Great, thank you so much, Esther. And you also do some work with Dr. Nemhart. Are you still doing some work with Dr. Nemhart too? Can you
Oh,
share a little bit about that as well? Sorry.
oh, for sure. Yeah, Jessica, she actually she and my dad worked together first, and then like back in the I don't know, like I think they met in like oh 06, oh 07, and and that's how I met her originally. And through the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy, she's done she's done a lot of work in like grassroots organizing, like grassroots economic organizing. But um, I'll write that in chat here if you're curious. But and then when I was at the UW Center for Co-op, she helped me write, or she co-authored the Latinx Co-op Power Report with me because she has the doctorate degree, so she can do that, formally, more formal academically, which I really appreciated. Um, and we've been working on some research of co-ops in prisons of prisoners, people imprisoned, globally, and looking at that. So we have one academic piece out, and we're hoping to get another piece out for the public soon. So yeah, she is just a such a good person, and who like her kindness and compassion just, as you know, like emanates through her work and how she approaches it. So I really appreciate her a lot. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Esther. We're just gonna keep moving forward. But may you please talk about what does the ideal funding ecosystem look like for Black-led cooperatives and entrepreneurial ventures?
Sure. Um, do you want me to start with that question?
Wait, did we? Because yeah, we did the introduction with who are you? Yes,
Sure,
please.
sure. Awesome. Yeah, we'll do. So yeah, I think first of all, like I was like, oh, I should ask um I should ask the people who are in the Black-led co-ops and entrepreneurial ventures what is helpful. So you know, um I can share as both someone who is Latina and has tried to do entrepreneurial co-op work, and also just like observations, but I think ultimately, like I'm not the one to, answer it necessarily. But some things that I think are I think that funding needs to be contextualized in an ecosystem of seeing each other as like whole people. So um like I think it's really important what the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops is doing with healthcare, dental vision, like trying to get that more rolling. Because I know for me, like I had to like when I was part of Ajani and that was my main job, I didn't have healthcare. I had to pay for it, right? Okay, sure, sure. Gotcha. Yeah, so so I think like recognizing that we have other needs as well, and like how do we support each other? And so with our lending hats at Shared Capital, we recognize that, and we try to help connect folks to different we help to we facilitate some connections to different resources in the ecosystem because we know those are issues, those can be barriers to starting up, right? So I think that's something that's really valuable about our work is that we do try to, we are a part of the broader ecosystem of co-op community and try to like connect people, like problem solve. We problem solve a lot with people. Um, and it's a very relational thing when you're getting a loan with us. We we look at the numbers, but we also look at like the broader picture, um, how folks are working together, um, common challenges with co-ops. For example, like I'll share like um, like the way we assess how a co-op is organi running organizationally. Like how are people working together? Are they a good team or not? That actually matters for whether or not in the long term about whether or not they can pay back the loan because sometimes they fall apart if they're not working well together. If they inherit these ideas of what ownership is from a capitalistic, individualistic standpoint, and they're playing that out in their co-op and they're not able to unlearn that, that's actually a real big barrier for us getting the money back so we can give it to other co-ops. Um, I've seen some co-ops fall apart because of that, which really stinks. We try to, even as hard as we work with people, like there's only so much we can do, and people have to like ultimately make that decision to work together in a cooperative ownership way and shift that mentality. So I think that's something. Those are just some observations. Yeah,
Um, and can you also talk about the funding process? So like what are the key steps and where do people often get stuck? And may you also draw on like what the funding process looks like for shared capital and how people can access your services?
sure. So first of all, you can just email me or any of our team. Like number one, if you have questions, even after this and you're still feeling a little stuck, I'm more than happy to talk with you one-on-one, or one of my team members can to talk through your particular situation. Um, do you mind if I screen share? Okay, awesome. Let me get up this little chart here. Can you see that chart? No. Okay,
No.
cool. Awesome. You can see it now.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you. So usually it can take several months. It can take like 2 to 3 months if things are all set and in order. Oftentimes folks are still working on some things, but um, number one, like I said, like email or call us. We'll have an inquiry call and we just talk about stuff where you're at. If a loan or a line of credit makes more sense for your particular situation, what things we would recommend you work on before applying. You go back to your co-op, you clarify with your members. We want to make sure everyone's on board, um, that they want this loan. It's a big thing to take out a loan or a line of credit. And then you can apply online. There's no fee, nothing like that. But, we send you the link, you apply online. We get back in touch, and you're assigned a loan officer, which might be me, it might be someone else. Um, And then there's a back and forth of a few months because on our end we're really collaborative and we work with a team on our back end. Like I'll go back, I'll say, hey, here are some updates. What do you guys think? And they're like, well, what about this and this? And then I bring back questions. And I like to warn people that we get real annoying. I just say that in advance. Um, um, and then eventually, when we feel like it's ready, we go to the loan committee for a decision, and they give the final stamp of approval or not. There's a few week closing period and then people get their money. And after that, it's just like people, give like regular updates, check-ins, that sort of thing with us. Um, and these are the documents we look for in the application. So this is the minimum. We'll often ask for other documents because we work with like co-ops of any kind. So like anything from grocery stores to a small worker co-op to um, a farming co-op. And oftentimes they can't access like dollars from traditional banks or lenders, so they'll come to us, um, which is what we want. You know, we want it to be more accessible. But yeah, we'll look at the articles or and bylaws or operating agreement, see how your co-op's incorporated and make sure it's legally a co-op. You don't have to be incorporated under a co-op statute. Like you could be an LLC or a general corporation, but you do have to have bylaws or operating agreement that is structured cooperatively. That tells you, that you work together cooperatively. We look for business plan and then financial projections for the next 3 years. This is where I think the financial projections are where people get stuck the most. Um, like folks are like, hey, I can't predict the future. And I get that. So we're trying to create some more resources. Um, yeah, we're trying to create some more resources on how to do some of these things where there are pain points. I'm actually transitioning into a new role soon that's going to be more educational and program development role. So my goal is to like help with some of these pain points. Um, and then we look at past historical financial statements, the profit and loss statement or income statement and balance sheets. Um, the most recent statements year to date. So if it's July, if you apply in July, we'll say, okay, can we have January to July financials? And then we'll look at the tax return. Um, so stuff like that. Um, let's see here. Yeah. And then was that it? Oh yeah. So yeah, I say like just reach out the sooner the better. So that you can start planning. Sometimes these things can take a long time to work on and develop. So yeah, we are very like we tailor to each co-op.
In the chat, there's a question. Can I ask what percentage of startups versus existing co-ops you fund?
Good question. I'm sorry, I'm not sure of the percentage. I know it's a little harder for us to fund startups because they don't have the history, so it's harder to assess the risk. But it doesn't mean we don't fund startups. So, um, yeah, I recommend if you do have one, like we can kind of look and see, like, what's your plan looking like? Like, do you have a good lineup of next steps, your business plan, your financial projections? We can help with some of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Liana, do you have the next few questions?
Um, oh, did you ask both of them together?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Yep. So next, moving into challenges and opportunities. What are the biggest barriers for cooperatives and entrepreneurs seeking funding, and how can they be overcome? And I'll put that in the chat.
Oh, Esther, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Um, yeah, let's see here. You know, okay, I have an idea. Maybe if people want to drop in some barriers they've had to funding, I could also address some of those, like from, how we would look at that from shared capital set. Um, but so if you have something that's like, well, this happened to me, so just drop it in chat and we can talk about it. But um, what I see are oftentimes are things like a lot of folks come to us because sorry, sorry. Well, Vanessa, I can't help you with that. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, no, I get that. I get that. I procrastinate. No, we're all busy. We're all very busy and stretched at capacity. That's actually a very real thing, I think. It's very hard when you're trying to transition from like making a living at one job to, if you're not independently wealthy, to trying to have the time to start up a whole nother job. So maybe procrastination is actually just capitalism pushing us to our max. So, you know, I'll just reframe a little, maybe. Um, let's see here. So, yeah, So yeah, but I think some of the stuff with folks going to other like a big reason people come to us is because we don't require personal credit scores and we don't do personal guarantees because like otherwise a bank will like ask for like all of your personal credit scores, and if one person has an issue or something or like has had issues that would make it harder to get a loan, like it might affect the whole team, the whole business, and that's that's not great. We look at the co-op, we want to give we want to give people a chance. We're in this together, you know. Um, let's see here. So, and then um, let's see here. Missing historical financial documentation because of a recent startup. Yeah, so I'd say if it's a startup, we don't require the historicals, right? But here's something I would recommend if you're a startup, if you're coming to us and you're asking for a big chunk of money. Um, See what you can do to test the market with starting smaller. All right. So, oh, just one sec. I have to cough. Excuse me. Um, so like say you want to open up a whole restaurant. Okay. It's going to be a big risk to just dive into one spot and have one set menu and hire all new staff all at once, right? That's a big thing. That's a big deal. Even though it's worth it, how can you break that down first and show like test your idea, test your food. So maybe do some pop-ups and ask for, anonymous surveys of like people rating your food. It's hard, but you gotta do it. It's hard to get feedback sometimes, but you gotta do it. Or maybe you start with a food truck and you see how that goes. That's a lot less cost intensive effort. And then you're like, okay, but the long-term plan is definitely to do a building, but we're going to try it out with a food truck. We're going to get more customer base, like people know about our food more. So think about it like break it down into little chunks that can build up. That's my recommendation. Um, or maybe you start with maybe if you're doing like consulting, you start with a few different workshops and you see how they go. And you develop some good branding and marketing together and kind of clarify your vision as a team for your co-op. So that's what I would recommend if you're a startup. Like do some of like break down your whatever industry or business you're doing in the little pieces and then like have ways that you can like say, hey, here I've done 3 workshops. I've done, you know, 2 of them are repeat customers or something like that. So you can show us like, okay, like I have been testing my concept. And then I see an issue needing more money than you have been approved to have access to. Yeah, I think we really try to match the source the uses, like so like we want to make sure that we get you enough money to succeed, but not so much that it's like overly burdensome, right? So it's finding that sweet spot, and that can be hard. One way can be to raise money from your community. Like you can do like Class B. Have y'all heard of Clark Arrington? Okay, he's a lawyer. He just passed away actually. Um, Really amazing person. And he started Class B shares at my old co-op, Equal Exchange, back in the 80s. He started those, and those are non-voting shares where people can invest in your co-op, but they don't have the vote. And he was an African American man, and as well, and he just like created this whole system where you can help the community invest in your co-op without compromising the co-op itself as a democratic entity. So look at different models, use the co-op model to your advantage, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. And could you drop the name in the chat, Esther, who you were referencing, just so. Okay. It looks like someone else dropped another barrier from Nisha. creating a financial projection budget, which includes paying myself. I'm unsure how to word that or how to build my compensation structure because I want to project making a minimum of 20K a month eventually.
Okay. Well, in that case, like I would recommend that's awesome. I would recommend it depends on the industry, how many people are involved, what your business plan looks like. So get real detailed with your business plan. Like okay, I anticipate to make 20,000 a month, I need to what's your business, Vanessa?
Hey, my name is pronounced Venetia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Um,
sorry, Anisha.
that's
Yeah, yeah.
okay. That's okay. So my business is called Women on Wednesday Coaching and Consulting Services. I provide two signature support groups where we do group coaching. I offer one-on-one coaching. I do workshops. I do events. I initially started hosting support groups on campus in 2018, and then I decided to extend it into the community and launch it as a actual business in 2022. So I've seen and I've been collecting data. I have like a lot of information to back up that this is working, that this is needed in our community. But I'm also like still working on my relationship with money. And I want to manifest making 20K a month. That is my minimum goal. But I know it's gonna take time to get there. I'm not like saying I need it tomorrow to happen, but how do I develop a financial projection budget that will allow me to also include that in there. Like I've been told by some people who come in and kind of giving me some business advice, and they'll say like some people don't want to see that you're getting paid that much. They don't want to see that. So I'm like, well, how do you word that? I don't know how to word that. Does that go into like admin? I don't know. Like, but I know that like eventually when I think about projection, I'm like in the future, this is what I see. I do see the need, I see the demand, I see the service is servicing in the community and it's doing well. But like how do I word that? Like I said, I got the data, but like how do I word that I need to be paid 20K a month?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Uh, I think like working backwards, like work backwards from like see where you're at, like however much you're bringing in now versus where you want to go. Break down like what brings in what money and say, okay, like here's what I need to do to bring in this much. Um, and as long as and I can talk more about it later if you want, like one-on-one later, but if you can like if you can figure out like how to make that work, then and still show that the business can run in a healthy way with your making that much, and have a little reserve set aside. Because you want your business to be long-term sustainable too, right? So you want to keep making that much each month, right? In the future. So um then that can help support like, okay, it makes sense to have this salary, right? Um but yeah, I'm happy to chat more if you want later.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, because I see myself because currently I'm not making nearly enough at
Yeah.
all because I'm providing services in an underserved community. So my goal isn't to necessarily take the money from my members. I need grants, funding, overhead money. Like I need seeded money so I can actually supply the services because I'm providing a service, but I'm not paying myself. Like I'm not getting paid for real to really
Mm.
run the program. Most of the money that we get is going right into the food and the outings, the books and the workbooks and all that stuff. So it's like I'm not even getting paid anything right now, but I know that if I didn't have to work a 9 to 5 to cover the cost of having to, be able to be a full-time entrepreneur, that's what I see to sustain my life, my personal life. That's what I see. But outside of that, I know that the other funding is really just to cover the services, the programming, and all the other needs that come up for my members. So,
Hmm.
but I appreciate that. I'll be happy to reach out to you, and schedule a one-on-one or something. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. And some of that might fall under like a business consultant, but I'm happy to talk with what I do know. Yeah. Or think I know. I'll do my best, like, yeah, to talk through stuff. So, yeah, I think it's really
I,
important that we like put ourselves into the grants. We need to pay ourselves. We need to make this sustainable for us. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Mhm. Thank you. So our next question, how do we move beyond traditional funding models to better serve cooperatives and community-driven businesses?
Yeah, yeah, I think so it matters to me that like shared capital is a co-op. The US also has a whole give a little thumbs up if you've heard the term CDFI, because I hadn't actually heard that term before I worked here, but or understood what it meant um fully. So it's community development financial institution, and like their lenders, there are about 800 of these CDFIs across the country, of which we're one of them, that have a mission-based lending to make it more accessible because um like there's been so much discrimination and racism and um exclusion in the lending history in this country, right? Um so I think to me it really matters that we're a co-op because we're more responsive to our members. Um and it also, we have that CDFI standing so that we can access some more funds, help other people to give us who want to give us money know that we have this like certification, that we are mission based. Um, I think those are two things, like so the CFI and then the co-op part. Um, the CDFI part where it's actually like somewhat dependent on, I don't know, like it is through the Department of Treasury, I think. So actually, like right now, it really matters that we're a co-op because we're not as dependent, and our structure at Shared Capital, we're not as dependent on some of these federal dollars that are asking people to stop standing up for what matters. This is but this moment is so like I think like I think a lot of people already haven't had access to services, right? And it's just becoming more worse. It's exacerbated right now, and in a way that's very, even though it's already bad, the scale is getting worse. And so it matters that we can still say, like, speak up for racial justice, economic justice for each other, as people. And the co-op model is actually allowing us to continue those efforts in the wake of potential fascism, right? Or dictatorship. I don't know. We may be going down this road. And so we want to like think like, um, how can we support each other? And to me, like the co-op model is one tool. It's not the final end all be all. You still have to unlearn bad things to be able to relearn cooperativism. Yeah, 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 exactly. In the chat. I love that comment. Thank you. Like, so we have this beautiful opportunity, like you're saying, like we have this opportunity to show the power of our model right now. We have the opportunity to show how strong we are when we work together. About a third or fourth of our funding comes from members, from co-ops. And that means that this lending can keep going, this money can keep rotating amongst each other, right? So, um, I don't think, I honestly, I don't like money. I think it, I'm extreme even to like my ex was an anarchist and they're like, oh, I can't even go there. I was like, well, I can't, but, so it's kind of ironic that I'm a loan officer, but I see that this is the world we live in, and so how do we how do we support each other in this world we live in and keep our eye on the prize of creating more just societies? So I think these are some steps towards it. I don't think it's the end all be all, but I think we need to think of that, and also again seeing each other as whole people. Um, to me, whether or not a new entrepreneurial co-op succeeds in part goes back to if they can get access healthcare, like I was talking about earlier, right? Or access childcare, um, other services people need to be able to make it work. So it's part of a bigger picture. It's not just isolating the business so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think so. The next question is, what role does trust and relationship building play in securing and sustaining funding for cooperatives? Earlier, you'd also mentioned that sometimes, when groups fall apart or there's conflict, it definitely, bites into the longevity of the co-op, but also the loan. Yeah, so just what does relationship and trust play in securing funding for cooperatives?
Yeah, for sure. So thank you. And sorry, I'm plugging in my computer. But yeah, and also can I just say I love these questions. These are such good questions. Um, that we don't always get asked, but I think are really hitting at some roots of things that are very important. Um, so so from as as a co-op lender, we build relationships with co-ops over time. Um, basically, like we ask that people communicate with us and work with us and are trying, you know. So if we say, hey, we really see the need for a market assessment, analysis because we are not sure about XYZ. If people are trying, even if they can't afford a professional one, like if they are doing their own back of the envelope one, or trying to get some help, like we work with people. So, excuse me, I think the relationship element is really important as a lender. Um, we have a very high rate of return, like higher than normal. Like people pay back our loans higher than normal because we work with them over time. We'll extend the loan maturity if need be. We problem solve. So from that end, that's important. But then within the co-op, I've seen how, and this is something I want us as a shared capital to dive deeper into at some point, like to have more resources for people to talk about. But I've seen how money impacts people's relationship with each other at the co-op. Like if they don't have it from before, it can be really intense and overwhelming. Even if from like a business standpoint, we've assessed and we think, okay, like it makes sense. Sometimes it can cause some stress or um, bring up feelings of of possession and fear. Um, even though we don't do like personal guarantees or something, it can still tap into these feelings, right? And um, I think that a group really does need to, maybe build up have things that they work groups have things that they work on, good systems and processes in place for like I like to say, like think of the worst case scenarios. Just like write out a bunch of worst case scenarios and then see if your organizational structures if your organizational structure um helps you navigate those conflicts, those worst case scenarios. So like does your organizational or cooperative structure help you navigate these things? Um, are you ready for those? So that's a way to build up to start assessing okay, here's we have some really good and then practice making decisions together under small things. Like over small things first, have regular meetings, even if it doesn't seem like you need to, just get in those practices because those habits and those practices are going to come into play when things are harder. And maybe you have to make some hard decisions around money. Um, those are my recommendations.
And then finally, from our side, before we just turn it over to questions from the cohort members, is how do we dismantle traditional funder roles to make room for self-autonomy and self-determination? And I think like this was also talked about too. Yeah, funding is change. I mean, funding is always changing. Funding has never really been for the people that are most impacted. And so how do we really lean into that self-autonomy and self-determination for making sure we see this work through and make a path for it?
Yeah, such a good question. And again, I would say like this is where I think, like we need to listen to people impacted more than the funder, you know. But I think the thing is like as the funder, Shared Capital has been willing to change some things, like policies or things, in order to be responsive to needs. So if we get people telling us like, hey, this is making it really hard for me, to get money from you, then we can see, okay, like we need to make this more accessible. How can we do that? Um, I think like being a co-op, I mentioned that, but like having that structure can help because like, our policies are set by cooperators that are borrowers, um, or they designate someone to run on their behalf for the board. They're involved in committees that determine, like we have a loan committee that makes decisions on loans. We have finance committee, we have racial justice committee, executive committee. So there are different ways borrowers can get involved. And and then I think like oh yeah, another thing is, we also have held funds for groups and we can talk like if a group wants to have their own fund that they decide about, um, we can talk about that. Like as long as it's for co-ops. But we can talk about like, okay, like we can hold this money and this group makes the decision, right? Over that money. So that could be another way. Um, those are some things. I don't think it's a whole list. I think there's a lot more room for improvement, but those are like some things that stand out to me.
Well, thank you so much, Esther. I know that some questions have already come in the chat, but I welcome any other questions that folks might have in the cohort in the few minutes that we have remaining.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to make a statement on what you mentioned about how the money can, change or shift the dynamic in like your co-op. And for me, as somebody that's like building from built from the, ground up, I can, it resonates, and it's interesting because I think that it's as your business grow and evolve, because when you talk about like funding shifting and, terms and stuff like that shifting, I feel like even the vision kind of shifts sometimes too. So constantly reiterating with your team and having those meetings where you guys are communicating on the same level of understanding, I think is so prominent in building up a business in general. It just and I'll even put it in a group chat NDAs, because that's something I'm starting to get really okay with now. I have done taken a lot of time out building like structure and operation in my, like the way we process things, like the system and how it's, first step, second through step, step 1 through whatever, I've been working really hard on that. And what came up for me too is like even getting like NDAs and having different, because especially for me, I do coaching and consulting. So we're building programs, and we all have similar ideas on how we're gonna like work together, like, so it's like it's so important. That's all I'm saying. I just want to reiterate that the structuring part, the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, like that is so it's so it's so important to be on the same page with your team and constantly communicating. um, especially when it comes to the funding and stuff coming in too. So thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I want to hear from the group more. I want to like listen to all of your answers to these questions. But I know we don't have time, but like, I appreciate folks listen, sharing and hope you get to talk more about these things at some point. So yeah.
I'm just gonna open up maybe for the last minute for any questions. If not, we can give Esther back some of her time for the afternoon. And while we wait for any additional questions, I'm just plugging Social Impact Now to, unfortunately, weren't able to join, but they're a great resource with a focus on like women, BIPOC, and queer folks too. And while they're located in St. Paul, well, in Minnesota, they do have a lot of national networks as well. So just plugging that in the chat as well. But yeah, anything else? Okay. Well, I saw, Esther, that you put your email in the chat, but maybe we can bring it back. If I can find it, bring it back to here it is. I'll just add that back to the chat if you want to reach out to Esther to talk more. But if not, I'll follow up with any other questions that maybe didn't come up for you today in the space. But if not, thank you so much for your time, Esther. Really appreciate it. And yeah, grateful for the work that you and Share Capital are doing. We're just like Ignite with Mark, talking about their work. So yeah, thank you. And if people could give their thank yous or reaction, that would be wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you all so much and appreciate your work. I love Nexus and I love you guys. So thanks so much. And I'll see you around. Please reach out.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. So we have more time. So I'm wondering if maybe we can take maybe a short, I don't know, break, 5 minute break. Yeah. So coming back at 1:15, and then we'll do some more time for small group and large group discussion. So let's just take 5 minutes, come back at 1:15 Central. So I'll put some music on again. And sorry. All right, welcome back. Sorry for the abrupt cut off again, but wanting to open up the space to hear back from folks. So I'm gonna drop in the chat um, an order just so we can make sure to hear from everyone. Feel free to pass if you don't want to say anything or put something in the chat, but I'll drop kind of that order for a stack so we can just make sure that we hear from everyone in the space. So just inviting Heather first. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share in the large group, we'll start with you and then just go through the order that's listed.
I mean, I learned a lot in this session and hopefully that we can incorporate it in our business that we have where we live about the grants and the funding and all that. I always learn a lot with you guys, to be honest. Some of the stuff I would have never found out.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Whoever's next.
All right, Jessica.
So I was paired with Heather, and we were talking about how we would have never heard about any of this stuff if we weren't with this fellowship, and how a lot of people like to gatekeep, and y'all know how it is. So I got my notes, and I'm gonna wait for the PDF, not the PDF, the replay to come out, and I'm gonna listen again because I know I missed some stuff, but I definitely learned a lot too. So thank y'all.
Thank you. Ishay.
This session gave me a lot of anxiety. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I started thinking about like how I'm gonna get my cooperative budget together. I can't even stick to my personal budget, or I can't even like be like have a sustainable life with this one income that I'm like working on. Um, and in my first group, I was just like, I mean, I've been transparent about that in all my breakout groups. Like, y'all, I'm struggling today. Because I'm trying to figure out how can I manifest this for the co-op, and I can't do it on a like an individual, personal level. Um, and just some of the feedback I've gotten has been super helpful from everybody in my like groups. So I just wanted to thank y'all, and I appreciate y'all for like uplifting me and holding space for me in that. But then also, I'm walking away from this conversation with some like resources that can help me personally and resources that can help the co-op that we're building. And so I just love that this is a resource hub and the space to be vulnerable, and to really build relationship. There's not a lot of places that is doing that right now. So thank you both so much for holding this space.
Okay. I can read Jackie's comment in the chat. During my group session, we discussed how grateful we are for the information that's shared here. We would not have known these things otherwise. For example, not having to use your personal credit. Yeah, thank you. All right, Charlotte.
To Ishay, there are some free budget tools. We used one for the nonprofit. I would Google free budget tools for cooperatives or nonprofits that'll help you get your budget done. Um, the other thing is the information was really helpful. It does send me back to the drawing board. I need to do a little more research on the various different types of cooperatives. And obviously, we'd have to have all our stuff together before we approach an organization like this for funding. So, what I was saying in the breakout is, you need to have the details of your vision filled in. That's it.
All right, Chipo.
I want to say, because Isha and I were in second room together, and I really want to virtually wrap my arms around her in support and thank all of you for being here and being vulnerable in this space. And my brain is constantly working. And so I really appreciated this session. Brianna and I actually were doing our overview to start to do our final presentation. And, all the issues that Christina and Esther talked about today, relationship with money, those issues. That's what we're kind of like leading with. And so I thank you all for, again, holding space for all of us and, opening up my creativity and really each of you, in your vulnerability really helped me feel even more strong and that, we can all help and carry each other in and to and through this.
Thank you. Monica. All right. For Monica, during our group session, Ishay mentioned that it is difficult to build a cooperative with an individualistic/capitalistic mindset. This is something that I'm still working on myself. Also, further refining my vision of what I define as wealth, which has little to do with money. Thank you. All right, Nisha.
I was in the group with Jackie, and Chipo, and I just want to echo what Jackie said. One thing that we reflected on was just having access, being a part of this fellowship has been so it's an honor to be in this space because I feel like we're receiving like untapped resources. I love calling it untapped resources because it's not like a resource that I feel like is on the top of the list of people's ideal organizations to share amongst the greater community, I guess. So in this case, I look at it like you guys are connecting us with organizations that we probably wouldn't just find on the top of the list on Google or connected. So I just that's what we reflect on. I just wanted to say that it's just an honor being a part of this space, and like even what Ishay said, just being able to be vulnerable, and everyone in here just kind of sharing their experiences, and I don't know, I love this, I really do, and I appreciate just being a part of this fellowship. So thank y'all.
Thank you. I added Nicolina to the stack just in case we wanted to share things as well. So yeah, I really appreciate the space as well. I think yeah, just talking and naming the fears and like how do we move out of that space into abundance and recognizing the wealth, like knowing that our definition of wealth as Black people is different, like tapping into that and yeah, just reminding ourselves like we yeah, we are who we need, and like the need has never been, not I don't want to say never been, but it's very apparent we need each other, to thrive. And yeah, I really appreciate the space and you all and learning from you all, and thank you. So that's all I have to share right now.
Yeah, I think I echo everything that's been said here. Like the fear and everything is definitely real. Um, I think I appreciate being in this space because I feel like every week it's a struggle just to keep going, just because of all the things that are happening. So this space just gives me like a different perspective of like what's possible, and also just a reminder of like a physical reminder, seeing you all in the room, hearing your voices, hearing your ideas, like reaffirms like the work that is being done to push back against the things that are like we're facing, and so that's really empowering for me. So yeah, I'm grateful for all of you. And this was definitely a hard day. Just talking about finance and co-ops is difficult. And I think we're still trying to figure out the best ways to sort of like present this session. And so I know I've plugged this multiple times now, but I'll plug it again. Like Catherine Langford, really a great resource for thinking or talking about finances. We've been in spaces with her through Open Road Fund and I've attended like the Open Road Fund community wealth building sessions. Just the way she speaks about it, like very much humanizes us and like humanizes everything, and like it's centered in like our pain and our trauma. So I would definitely use that as a resource, even if it's like listening to her podcasts. That's just one way to sort of like help ground us further. And that's all I have.
I have one more thing to add. This is
Yeah.
Charlotte. Everybody, I've heard this word fear several times now, and I just want to remind all of us our ancestors went through way worse than what we're going through, and they made it.
Mm,
So, what does that mean about us? We
mm,
can make it too. Okay? Don't be afraid. Know that it's in our DNA to overcome this. It's in us. All we got to do is go within and call on it, and it's there. We have already won. The fact that we are seeing people purposely try to kick up this fear is because they are afraid of our rising. They see it happening, it's scaring them. So they're trying to scare us. Don't be afraid. We come from legends.
mm.
That's all I got to say.
We come from legends. Mm, thank you for that. We come from legends. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, all right. Liana, my bad.
I'm gonna drop in the chat our survey again. Feel free to take it when you feel like it. But wanting to hold some time and space, maybe about 5 minutes or so, during our time right now before we close, for folks to begin to put some thoughts down if you'd like, and then we'll move into our closing and depart. So I'll just take the next 5 minutes to just give people some space to do that if they'd like. All right, coming back. I'll pass it to you, Nicole, if you wanted to share things.
Yeah. So briefly, Chifa brought it up, which was that was great timing. But I'll just talk about briefly what we have left and then the thing that I am supposed to announce for today. So what we have left is we have a session at the end of March talking about governance and bylaws. And then we have a follow-up session talking about transformative restorative justice and conflict. As Esther brought it up earlier, talking about the importance of like navigating conflict. And so that's part of our North Star curriculum, but also talking about community engagement. And then we have our presentations. So at the back of which this will be emailed out this week as well, but at the back of the folders there's a presentation guide. And so presentations are really just a space for us to hear more about your work. This is also a space where we'll invite four people, two in the morning, two in the afternoon, to also hear more about your ideas and ask questions. And so you get to structure your presentations in the way that feel best for you. And so there are some guiding questions, but if you want to tailor your presentations to try to get more funding, so for funders, then you would tailor your presentation that way. If you're trying to get more community members to be part of your co-op, then you'd focus your presentation that way. If you're trying to get more members to join your co-op, then you tailor it that way. There's really, and you get to either present by storytelling, give a formal presentation with PowerPoints or Canva slides, or if you want to draw pictures and show us, then that's fine too. In the past, we've had one North Star group did a zine, which I thought was really fun. So it's really up to you how you're going to present. We'll put the different time allocations for everything in the follow-up email, but just wanted to give a heads up that that's coming in, I think it's either April or May. But yeah, all those details will be sent via email. Just wanted to verbally talk about the fact that we do have final presentations coming. And oh, if you want to get more people in this cohort to join your co-op, then this is your way to basically have a pitch. For if you're fundraising, Nisha, this is your way to ask the folks in the cohort and uh, practice your fundraising with us and so forth. Sorry to call you out. I just remember that was one of the things that we talked about today. So yeah, so that's coming up. And then finally we have graduation, which we'll have more details about, where it's just a space to celebrate all the work that you all put in this. It'll be 7 months by then, all the time and effort, all this the days you spent, all your Saturdays that you spent with us, and just celebrate that achievement too. So that's all the announcements that I have for us.
And when is the presentation?
I'll put it in the chat. I have to double check the calendar.
And how much time does each presenter get?
I'll also follow that up with the email. I know Leanna and I talked about it, but I was having trouble finding the presentation guide as I was searching, but I'll put that in the chat too. It might be like 10 minutes-ish. I can't remember what we came out, either 12 to 12 minutes.
Yeah, so we'll send these details, but final presentations are on May 3rd. So that's the Saturday before graduation. And I believe it's about, yeah, 15 minutes, 8 minutes for the presentation, about 5 minutes. Is that right? We'll check and get back to you. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but we are still figuring out the format. We initially said hybrid, but I don't know if we've confirmed that. So
Yeah, I think we did get some new old owls in the office because I think, one of the things we're sensitive to is the fact that our virtual participants did not have that as easy access as our in-person. While we did get some new owls in, we haven't tried it with the full group first, and that would not be a good day to try it out. So it will most likely be virtual. Just so there's easy access for everybody.
so we can, yep, update that and make sure that's clear. But yes,
Yeah, and that's all I have.
very, yeah, and that's all that I have, unless I don't know if anyone has any announcements that feel relevant for the group they might want to share, and if not,
I
say
shared a link with you guys a couple of days ago via email for a grant that's available. Did you share it with the rest of the group?
That will mostly go out with a follow-up email so that we can have that grant, Christina's presentation, and anything that maybe Esther would want to share. So yes, thank you for sharing that. Did see that in the email. So yeah, we'll share that out with the group.
Okay.
I just wanted to plug that there's going to be a Racial Healing Roundtable for Black Community March 13th at Penumbra. That is free registration, and we just talk about how grief plays a role in our ritual resilience. So I'll be there. I'm the wellness manager over there. Sorry, my kiddos are loud in the background. But please feel free to like reach out to me. My email is my first and last name at gmail.com. If you have any questions or if that's something that you're interested in participating in. Monica came to one of them. So y'all wanted to check in on Monica to see if it's like something fun to do.
One of the most amazing experiences I have had in my life. It has changed
Thank you,
my
Monica.
life. No, but it really has changed my life. But we don't have enough time to even talk about it. But thank you,
She
Ishay.
talked
What you
my
are doing
ear.
is
She talked my ear off about it, Ishay.
I'm glad, Monica, and I hope to see more of you there.
oh, I already bought my tickets. So
2 this time. We're both coming.
Yes.
Can you send the link to us, Ishay? That would be really helpful. So we can send that.
Yes, I can send a link to y'all.
Yeah. All right, I see from Nisha, the Black Market Minneapolis, vendor opportunity on March 8th at the Black Market. Thank you. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we can close early a little bit. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
well.
Thank
have a
you.
good weekend. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
What I wanted to add was on the boycotts question. They are powerful. Starbucks, as you look at, what's been happening in the genocide in Gaza, Starbucks and McDonald's have lost considerable income. So they do work. Look at BDS. It does work.
Yeah, and you can boycott and spread it and not but spread it by word of mouth so that they don't come after your livelihood. But the boycott, there's a video channel called Middle Nation. And I don't know if you guys,
Yes.
yeah, he's really
Actually,
on fire about it. So
I actually prefer Mint Press. Mint Press News.
mid
That's also
press,
good.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All
Peace.
right. Bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank y'all. Have a good weekend.
Okay.